The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Jameson Lopp from CASA. Oh yeah, you gotta unmute yourself and say hi. I forgot that part.
Hi.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Howdy ho, folks.
Vlad Costa from Bitcoin Takeover.
Hadouken.
Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Hello.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, Bitcoin's stealth rally puts it atop the quarterly scoreboard once again. Bitcoin's surprisingly fast exit from crypto winter has once again put the notoriously volatile digital currency atop the leaderboard in the first quarter for being the best performing asset class by a wide margin. With a 70% gain, Bitcoin is closing out its best quarter since 3 months ended in March 2021. Jameson Lopp, what do you think about the exciting price of Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, always exciting. I mean, it seems like everybody got sufficiently wrecked and maybe there's nobody else left at this point. And really what came out today was that the US government had dumped another 9,000 coins. So, you know, that seems to be the best counter indicator that they're going to keep doing that and Bitcoin's going to keep going up.
Another dream of Smithsonian museums in every state's smashed again. Dan Eve, the price of Bitcoin is up.
Well, you know, we've had recently more banks bailed. That's pretty much the reason why Bitcoin was born, or at least it was born just after the banks being bailed out. So it's kind of doing its thing, right? People thought that this would bring down Bitcoin heavily, especially obviously the price. But I think people are actually realizing that Bitcoin is the safe haven because, you know, the classic, if your money's in a bank and the bank closes, you can't get your money out. Whereas Bitcoin, you can always get it out as long as you have your private key. So, but the main thing is that, again, the network hit I think over 400 exahashes. So it's just like the hash rate is just smashing at the moment. It's sat at about 357 according to BitInfo charts. Difficulty at 46.83 trillion. Which is just insane. I mean, the growth there in terms of mining just shows you how much the network's growing, let alone how much it's being used by everyone. So I think maybe some of the other factors, like when there are more countries that are settling gas now in not in the dollar, and as the US dollar loses its kind of grip on the world as a world index, then I think that there's more of a chance that eventually countries will move to Bitcoin so that it doesn't specifically benefit one country using their currency. So I think, yeah, there's basically a lot but plus there's also always the dog what's it called? The tail wagging the dog or whatever, that whatever happens, you could just say the stuff this week was the reason for the price movement when it could be all sorts of things.
I think it's, why does the dog wag its tail? Because the dog is smarter than the tail. If the tail were smarter than the dog, then the tail would wag the dog. Vlad Costa, I thought only scammers like SBF used Bitcoin. How could the price be going up?
I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. Back in my mind, there's this hypothesis that it might be people waking up and realizing that Bitcoin is or was created specifically for these moments in history, because these crises are inevitable. We have been talking about them for a long time. It's pretty insane how almost everything that we have been saying for the past few years is coming true right now with Bank Swiss and what's the other one? BNP Paribas, if I'm not mistaken, from France. Anyway, these financial institutions which were too big to fail are getting bailed out. And now there's Bitcoin as a way to protect yourself. And I think a month ago, I was speaking with someone who was dunking on me saying, oh, you stupid Bitcoiner, can't you see that it's just another financial asset and it's correlated with the rest of Wall Street stocks? And if the S&P index goes up, Bitcoin goes up, and it's all correlated and it's not decentralized and blah, blah, blah. Joke's on you, asshole. Now I can finally prove to you that this has a real use case and purpose. So I'm happy that people finally use Bitcoin for what it's supposed to be used. And I hope that we spread the word to many more people, and we make them realize that volatility mostly goes upwards on the long term. Governments on a long enough term screw you, but the markets are actually much more efficient, especially if you choose to plunge into the chaos of free markets.
I remember a friend of mine called the exact Bitcoin bottom. Of course, he wasn't telling me to buy. He was telling me to sell. He also told me to sell Tesla stock. That would have been a disaster. Ben Ark, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin?
I think we just lost our sellers. Like, everyone's gone back to work. People have stopped self-funding Bitcoin businesses or whatever people do when you have a Bitcoin boom and everyone quits work and they think they're going to live off their stash, and then everyone has to sell their Bitcoin. And I think we just lost sellers. And also, I think that the world understands that the SBF swamp monster being cleared out of Bitcoin is actually ultimately a good thing and makes Bitcoin more valuable. And then again, yeah, like everyone's been saying, I think that people are questioning the security of their money in traditional banks, and how safe it really is. And they're like, well, maybe there's this alternative thing is valid, because yet again, the banks are screwing people. And then also the Nostar stuff. Nostar's getting pretty popular, and it's had Bitcoin incorporated into it, and that pulls in a lot of new users. So it gives a whole new example of how Bitcoin could be used, which I think is pretty powerful. So there's a collection of things, obviously, which are fundamental things which are making it happen, making the price go up. But ultimately, I think we've just run out of sellers. Like, people have stopped dumping on Bitcoin.
It must be exhausting. You're pushing that sell button, the price keeps going up. You're pushing that sell button, the price keeps going up. I can't imagine. Let's move on to the exit question. Predicting against the Bitcoin predictor ball, the greatest source of Bitcoin knowledge in all the Bitcoin industry. Jameson Lopp, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Oh, next week? We have no idea. But I'll be contrarian and say lower just for fun.
Dan Eve, higher or lower?
Yeah, I'm going to go lower. I think we're on a mini top here. It's going to be a bit of a downer soon.
Vlad Costa, we've got both an up and a down. Which way are you going to go?
Number go up. I'm going to slay that bear behind Dan. Sorry, Dan. I'm going to eat bear tonight.
2 ups and a down. Ben Ark, which way are you going to go?
Yeah, as long as you run faster than the other people when you're running away from the bear, you're fine. Up. Yeah, it's only going to go up because, it's going to go up.
The panel is feeling optimistic. Let's see how the ball does. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Here we go. Most likely, a positive prediction from the Bitcoin predictor ball. Now everyone can place their bets. Moving on to issue 2, Space Force Major to Pentagon. Mine Bitcoin. Yes, a new research paper from the Space Force says that the United States should mine Bitcoin, acquire a great deal of Bitcoin, and perhaps even have a pseudo cyber war instead of a real cyber war, all over the control of Bitcoin. It's an exciting new direction that the paper suggests. You can buy the paper on Amazon, but that doesn't mean the military is following it. Dan Eve, what do you think about the Space Force doing something we can all get behind, supporting Bitcoin?
Well, firstly, I think it's an incredible name, like Space Force. It's straight out of Spaceballs, right? Like, it's great. But he makes it. I think they make a good point, right? It's not Space Force that are overall that are endorsing Bitcoin, right? It's like one of the researchers who's kind of from MIT and that. But they make a good point that rather than kind of compete for nuclear war or swarms of killer nanobots, than to compete for money, something that they raised in there was about the concerns of the US military about its, the impact of mining Bitcoin on its emissions goals. Well, at the moment, isn't it roughly, depending on what estimates you look at, it's what the US military alone is 1 to 5% of all global emissions, and then Bitcoin's 0.3. So it's really just like a speck on the general emissions from the military. And wasn't there a report, actually, again, another one that came out today, saying that there's a much bigger increase market share of renewables in Bitcoin than again previously thought, right? The amount of Bitcoin that's being mined via coal is actually reducing quite significantly, and it's partly because of the mining companies that want to get they want to please shareholders who are into the sort of green side of things. So it's only a positive thing that we're going more green as we go along. Obviously, for Bitcoin, if the US military did start mining it, it would be pretty big for Bitcoin. Some people would see the bad side of it, right? That like, oh, the army's mining it, therefore it must be a bad thing. It must be a tool of war in some way. But it's also a good use of excess, excess like gas flaring and stuff like that. So there's plenty of sides to this argument. But ultimately, the Space Force sounds cool. So I think Space Force should be mining Bitcoin. That's for sure.
Obviously, this is a rare chance we get to agree with the Pentagon. I think that Space Force should mine Bitcoin as well and use the money to put a Smithsonian museum in every state in the United States. Yes, a convenient museum that you could drive to in your state, about your state, traveling exhibitions, the entire thing. Vlad Costa, what do you think about Space Force's plan for the U.S. government and the military to mine and hold Bitcoin?
I don't know, man. I don't care. This is not why I got into Bitcoin. If they want to do that, then good for them, I guess. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on this. Sorry.
I do think it's funny that now we're looking to some kind of major and a research paper, and he's recommending Bitcoin. And years ago, it's just been mad Bitcoins, a bunch of geeks in their computers typing away, saying how good it is. And there wasn't any article like Bitcoin Talk Forum post says, you should really buy some Bitcoin and hold it, And it's like, if you look back now, it's like, wow, even the Pentagon could have learned from that example. Even if Bitcoin didn't work out, they could have bought so much for so little, held it for such a small cost, just on the chance that it did work out. Ben Ark, do you think the government's going to get some Bitcoin?
I mean, I think that they're definitely looking at Bitcoin more and more because they have these CBDC aspirations. And then lo and behold, that's actually quite a hard task. And Bitcoin is just a collection of solved computer science problems. So more and more, they're going to look at Bitcoin as something perhaps which they could build their CBDCs on, or they can just utilize in some way. So it does make sense that governments are going to have more of a vested interest in getting hash power. It's kind of a scary concept because if they do start accumulating hash power, then they'll probably, of course, they'll try and use it to assert some control over Bitcoin. But it's kind of the next phase for Bitcoin. It's sort of something which we expected would happen, that countries would start competing for hash rate and also just mining and competing for Bitcoin. So it would be interesting to see. I'm not sure the concept of using having a sort of pseudo cyber war as opposed to a real world war. That's something which could have been done. You could just start a game of chess instead of having a war. It doesn't happen. People want to kill each other. Just, sadly, I don't think that's going to pan out. And then also currently, like, the more computational power you have, I mean, it's an important weapon in your war chest if you're going to war with a country in the modern warfare. So that already kind of exists. So I don't think it's going to be used for that, but I do think that countries are more and more like, they know that Bitcoin isn't going anywhere, and they can either try and fight it, or they can just try and incorporate. It's just like, proprietary software having to incorporate free and open source software rather than giving up on fighting it and having to actually just incorporate it into their software projects. It's the same as with countries, when they're building these CBDCs, or they have this banking infrastructure and they want to update it to a more modern banking infrastructure. It makes sense that they incorporate Bitcoin as opposed to try and fight it. So more and more we are going to have governments getting involved with Bitcoin. But we've had a few sparring partners over the years, so I think we're ready for it. And I think the users are ready for it as well, and they're not going to be able to co-opt it. So yeah, let's see how we can see what happens over the next year, I guess.
I agree with Ben. I'm certainly excited about these alternatives to warfare. As the 1980s movie Robot Jocks with an X predicted, the United States and Russia could just build giant robots and fight each other like Godzilla versus King Kong. not having to actually destroy any territory, just creating robots. Jameson Lopp, what do you think about the government's plan to mine Bitcoin? They haven't mined any Bitcoin since they were Satoshi Nakamoto. Oh, spoiler.
I really don't think this is going to happen. I haven't gone super in depth into a lot of the soft war and hash force theories that have been floated, but I have not been convinced by any of the stuff that I've seen. I really don't think that the incentives are there. Most of the claims and arguments that I've seen around why the government or military should be doing this seem to involve a lot of wishful thinking and like logical leaps. I don't see how it's going to happen from a practical standpoint, especially some of the stuff about how it's going to like protect us from cyber warfare and denial of service attacks and so on and so forth. It's way too abstract for me to actually see it happening. And if you look at, the U.S. government has 200,000 Bitcoin in their possession right now. If they want to acquire a lot of Bitcoin, they could do it a lot more efficiently than having to set up mining equipment and go after this like last 8 or 9% of Bitcoin that's left to be mined. From a power and game theory perspective, I think we're going to have to live with the fact that like meat space and the power dynamics within the physical world are going to be a completely different set of game theory than that which we have created with Nakamoto consensus and distributed networks, where we have a lot of sovereign entities around the world that are running these machine consensus algorithms.
Oh, pouring water on our parade, but James is probably right. It's probably not happening. And those 200,000 government Bitcoins are certainly going to build new Smithsonian museums in all 50 states. Everyone knows that. Moving on to the exit question. If you were the US government, what would you do? Make your own version of Bitcoin, a CBDC, or mine the rest of the Bitcoin as the article suggests? Dan, Eve, would you build a new coin? Or would you go mining?
Yeah, I think the government's always going to try and build one better. They always know what's best, right? They're like big mama, big data. They know what to do. Theirs will be better than this silly Bitcoin thing. And then in actual fact, what will happen is that they'll just blow loads of money on researching it, screw it up, and then end up capitulating.
I'd like to get one of those grants. I want to apply right now. Vlad Costa, do you agree with Dan? Will the government make their own coin?
No, I mean, I agree with Mr. Lopp. He said that it's very easy for the government to come for hodlers and confiscate their way to some Bitcoin. That's a much easier way for them to acquire some coins. It takes no effort. It takes no maintenance for anything. I'm also concerned about, what's it called? Armory? That large mining pool that has become dominant nowadays. Let me check.
Foundry.
Sorry. I'm also concerned about that one. I don't know how it's gonna play out. It seemed like when Bitcoin was mostly mined in China, the times were more peaceful, and now everyone's trying to regulate and tell you how you're supposed to use your home electricity and how you're not allowed to do it. Kind of insane, but whatever. I don't think the government is gonna try to mine anything. They're selling coins today, so you think they're going to try to secure the network?
It would be interesting if we saw a 1933 FDR gold seizure type operation from the government. And it would be even funnier when the government said, hey, we have all the Satoshi Bitcoins too, spoiler alert. And then they'd really build some nice Smithsonian museums. Ben, what do you think? Is the government going to make their own coin or just mine Bitcoin?
I mean, I think they have these developers trying to build these CBDCs, and inevitably they're going to write reports on a lot of these problems have been solved by Bitcoin, and this is why Bitcoin does it in X way. And all the the technology is wrapped up in the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. And they'll write the reports and feed it back to the governments. And then I think it's a good thing. Like CBDCs should be on Bitcoin rather than them making their own shitcoin, or rather than building on some other thing. Like, it makes sense that they build it on Bitcoin. And to me, it's the next stage of development where we can actually pull in enough liquidity that Bitcoin becomes stable as a medium of exchange. You can actually use it as money, and the price volatility isn't going to screw you. You can use it as day-to-day money. And the only way there's a chicken egg thing. Like, no one's going to use it as day-to-day money until it's stable, and then it's not gonna become stable unless people are using it for day-to-day money and you have the liquidity you need. So to me, like, build the CBDCs, please. I think it'll probably come from like poor nations which haven't got banking infrastructure and strong development teams. Like, there'll be someone will build some projects where you can build something.
I think we've lost the connection to Ben. Jameson Lopp, what do you think? Will the government build their own coin or just mine Bitcoin?
Not this government. So once again, it's a matter of game theory and power. So, you know, any first world nation that is already extremely powerful and has, you know, central banks that can manipulate their money supply, especially to the extent that they have power over many other countries in the world, like the United States, you know, they're going to want to maintain that, and they may be willing to upgrade it to have even further, you know, precise power by having a CBDC where, like, they can literally come up with more rules where they're, you know, saying exactly how you can use your money. They might even be able to, you know, take your money from you with a click of a button, much easier than they can right now. But, you know, the flip side of this, you know, nation state adoption of Bitcoin is a very interesting topic from a like macro geopolitical level. So I think there are nation states who will be incentivized to go the route of Bitcoin, as we have seen with El Salvador. You know, these will be tiny nations that don't have monetary sovereignty, or they are operating under the whim of these other larger nations. And so for them, because they don't have that level of power, their better option is to opt out and enter into a system that is more fair and doesn't really care about the various, you know, centralized networks within the traditional financial system.
You see, that's what I'd like to see, a battle between these small rebel nations, these developing nations who maybe would, like Ben said, make a CBDC on top of Bitcoin, versus your large, entrenched, established nations who would just roll up their own coin.
Then the dominoes will fall as well. Once one of them does it, like, all these nations will do it to create their own sovereign stable coin. If this is a recipe which is good enough and it's like not corruptible by inside and outside forces, and it works and it's stable and it's possible. These are possible problems. These are problems which could be solved, and you could build on Bitcoin. And when that happens, and then the US loses hegemony over the, you know, with the world reserve currency, and all these countries have their own stable coins, then I think that's when it will be like the revolution from the bottom up, and then the bigger countries might start adopting it and using it in their technology stack. Or, I mean, they might be looking into using the technology stack now, but I'd prefer that for them than them making their own shitcoin.
Well, and that's where I'd be really interested to see Jameson's game theory play out, where if this one and that one and this one all join Bitcoin, will some of the big ones start to join? And if some of the big ones start to join, and maybe they don't even need their own CBDCs, maybe they can do it on Bitcoin, and all of this can just turn out great. Let's move on to issue 3. Issue 3, Bitcoin falls after the CFTC sues crypto exchange Binance for allegedly breaking trading rules. We talk about Binance here almost every week. Ever since Malta, Binance has seemed to have no home country and were traveling the world almost allegedly as if they were a criminal enterprise, making their own rules and showing Coinbase what it's like to be a truly unregulated exchange. Now they're in trouble, perhaps for mixing their US client funds and information with the information from the countryless mothership that is Binance. Vlad, what do you think about the latest charge against Binance? Will they finally pick a home country, and will they survive this attack?
I'm not a big fan of Binance for reasons which concern the way that they conducted business. I'm not even sure how they got so big in 2017. The official narrative is that they listed every shitcoin in existence and allowed anyone to trade without KYC, but they were not the only ones. They had this tremendous growth around the world. They got to a point where I think they handled the money in a much more smart way. in 2021 especially. They refrained from the temptation to get featured on Super Bowl with some ad, and they did a pretty good job managing their budget to avoid cutting lots of jobs during the bear market, as was the case with FTX and Crypto.com and a few others. So I do have some respect for the way that they managed their business, but it's always been a bit shady with the way that they conducted business. I'm not a big fan of Binance, but if you check the description below, you're going to find the ref link for Binance. We get $5 each. I'm kidding. Don't do that. Don't sign up. Stay away. Get your Bitcoin from non-KYC ATMs or whatever, peer-to-peer. But yeah, Binance sucks.
It's never too late to sign up with that ref link down below. Yeah. All right, Vlad, let's go to Ben Ark. What do you think about Binance and their troubles with the U.S. institutions?
I mean, yeah, for such a long time, Bitcoin operated in this gray area, regulatory wise, and now it's stepping out of the shadows. And I think that's perhaps why more people have confidence in Bitcoin, and that's maybe where the price is going up also. And it's no longer a gray market, and it's going to get regulated. And then all these exchanges, which were kind of operating shady business models, there's going to be light shed on them, which there has been recently. And some of them will fall, some of them will survive, some will have to change, some of them will get fined. And that's just to be expected, I think. But it's just the process of stepping out the shadows and the gray market into a more established, and which is good ultimately, because it means that country, I mean, it kind of sucks because of the regulation stuff, so it's less fun, but it's good ultimately because it means it validates Bitcoin as an asset. And it means that countries are accepting that this thing's here to stay, and they just got to figure out how to like incorporate in a way where there's not going to be shady business happening.
Jameson Lob, I'm told that all the funds are Seifu. Is there nothing to worry about Binance at the CFTC?
Well, why did the market have a reaction to this? It's because Binance is so huge. They have a ton of Bitcoin and other crypto tokens that, they have possession of. They, I forget what the actual trading volumes are, but I think it's like over half of the market, right? If you believe the reported trading volumes, and they may be true because it seems like they drop the fees to zero fairly regularly to incentivize more people to come there. So I don't really have any opinions pro or con against how they conduct business. They definitely ran it, cowboy operation for a number of years, and they somehow have survived and are, trying to be more compliant now. So I guess good for them. But I see it from the lens of systemic risk and centralization of the. Could be another GOX or FTX or other massive collapse that will happen for one of 100 different reasons.
Dan, Eve, they've got no fees. Seems like a sweet deal. What do you think?
Well, I think they've come a long way, right? And I think one of the reasons why they did grow so kind of exponentially is that they've played the referral game really hard, like the referral system with all the influencers that they got on board, shilling for them. They had a good policy. Sorry, that's the wrong word. It seemed like, from what I heard, they had a policy whereby they kind of encouraged, how do you say, trading that may inflate the books slightly, massage the books as it were, allegedly. So that kind of made it look like, the markets there are always plump, right? Whenever a coin went live, and then they became the Bittrex of 2017 in terms of it got listed on Binance, and therefore it's gonna pump, So, and they're also really good at leveraging other communities, but also, and I'm not shilling Binance, by the way. I don't have any BNB, but they were actually one of the first. Whilst all tokens had no utility, there was actually a thing that you could do with them. Right, you got access to stuff. It actually had some slight utility to it, whereas most of the other shitcoins actually didn't. So I think that helped their kind of ecosystem. But they're definitely in the crosshairs now of a lot of regulators, which is why they're kind of an international nomad company. It seems like they're going to they're going to trip up soon, right? There's a lot of dirt on internal conversations, and they're also saying about tracing CZ's own funds that they were used for trading against their own customers. So it's not looking, allegedly, well, this probably, so it's not looking fantastic for them. And when you are such a big, we talk about the banks, right? They're about how the big banks, they think they're infallible, or kind of are. But Binance is like in a market where they're not so much cozy with the regulators. So they are much more likely, even though they are huge, they're much more likely to fall and be taken down. But what is I think what's kind of sad, because I read this today, of some nostalgia that Bittrex ceasing, well, they're not ceasing existence altogether, but in the US at least. That's one of the old school exchanges, right? I started playing around with Bittrex in 2014. And it's coming for they were the ones that actually they actually tried to abide by the rules as much as possible. So it's sad to see companies that are actually trying to be good not survive, whereas other companies that are being literally like crazy in their operations are just ultimately getting away with it.
Oh, well, Dan ruined my surprise. He's got all the hip news over there in England. Important message for Bittrex U.S. customers. Like Dan says, Bittrex appears to be closing their U.S. operations. So moving on to the exit question. Vlad, do you think that Binance will survive and continue being this kind of questionable operation, or will they end up like SBF and FTX and wrecked on the rocks below? And also, what do you think about the Bittrex announcement? Go ahead, Vlad.
Right, so first of all, I'm really happy that you gave me the last word because I had something else to add. I think I was too neutral when it comes to Binance, and I commented on their business model. I haven't looked at their accounting books. I have no idea how they're doing in reality and how much liquidity they actually have. But back in 2019, they got hacked and they lost some Bitcoin. And their CEO actually said that he wants to roll back Bitcoin to recover the funds. And then the next day he came back and was like, oh no, I was tired and I had no idea what I was saying. But I'm pretty sure that he was testing his Chinese friends to see if they agree with him to recover the coins. So fuck him, really. So I'm happy that they're going down. I'm just not happy that it's the government that's...
Those were exciting times when he went on Twitter and tried to roll back Bitcoin. I remember a lot of different responses to that. People were very upset.
Oh yeah, and what I wanted to say is that I'm not happy that it's the government that's taking them down. I wish it was the free market, but it seems like they performed pretty well in terms of competing on the free market, and they were able to amass this huge following. If you look at CZ's tweets, you're gonna see that he has lots of bootlickers and people who agree with him on a regular basis. Even when they were under scrutiny and people were withdrawing in masses back in December, there were people saying, oh no, we trust you, we're gonna sink with the ship. Aren't we gonna get some kind of reward for sticking with Binance through the bad times and whatever? I don't know, it's pretty shady, but on the other hand, they have been bad actors when it comes to Bitcoin. And also, due to their negligence, thousands of KYC accounts ended up on the dark web because their KYC database got hacked a few years ago, and they're doing their best to hide it with good marketing. I'm pretty sure that their sponsors in lots of sports competition. I've seen Cristiano Ronaldo, who is supposedly one of the greatest football players, and I mean European football players of all time, and he was promoting Binance. It seems too big to fall, but on the other hand, it seems like at least in the US, they're gonna get some scrutiny for basically trading against their users. About Bittrex, I don't have such strong opinions. I know it used to be quite the big casino back in the day, and it was also the best place for the troll box. But I don't really have such strong opinions. I feel kind of nostalgic about it, and I don't know. I hope they make it somehow, just for the simple fact that they mean something for a few Bitcoiners.
And Ark, what do you think about Binance and now Bittrex?
I mean, I don't really trust any exchanges that they have the funds to match the amount of value the users have of the exchange, because stuff gets hacked, people make bad business decisions. So being operating in a grey market, the funds are safe who like rolling back blockchain nonsense back then. I think it just showed how little he knew of how Bitcoin works. So no, I don't trust any of these exchanges, and if under scrutiny, I think a lot of them, will have to go into bankruptcy or be bailed out or whatever. As long as they can honor, the amount of withdrawals which are happening any one day, that's all they really care about. But on the bottom line, if they can balance the books, I just don't trust them. Maybe like Kraken is one of the only exchange which I would kind of trust, but the rest of them, yeah, like Binance and Bittrex and whatever else, I just don't trust them, and they've got the funds, so they're not safe.
Jameson, what do you think about this real world example of Coinbase being so regulated, Binance having no regulation, and both of them competing in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we can probably generally agree that Binance has been far more successful over the past cycle or so. And then the open question is, is playing it safe going to be better in the long term? Or, will Binance be able to continue hopping around and, perhaps its entity is sufficiently decentralized that it is nation state resistant? I mean, I find the Coinbase situation far more interesting than Binance. Like what Binance has been doing is pretty, straightforward, use regulatory and jurisdictional arbitrage to keep the various authorities at bay. I don't think that's a particularly novel tactic. We've certainly seen people do that in the gambling industry over the past few decades, but Coinbase, trying to do it the right way and follow the rules and ask for permission, they've had, I think, a number of different business lines and opportunities that they have failed to launch because of that uncertainty. And then now we're seeing a number of organizations like Bittrex just say, you know what, I'm out. It's like, I don't want to even take the risk anymore. So it seems that the United States is not doing a great job trying to foster innovation. And the shitty part of all of the regulatory attacks that have been happening are that the companies that are trying to play by the rules, they're just asking for the fucking rules, tell me the rules so that I can play by them. But no, instead it's this, political game where they keep asking for permission and just getting stonewalled, and therefore their hands are tied because, if you, especially if you have to talk to your lawyers and get your lawyers to sign off on business operations that you want to do, the lawyers are always going to take the most conservative stance possible. And so they're just going to be frozen.
I think you can just see the frustration on Brian Armstrong's face, because here he is trying to do everything right, trying to be legit, do the VCs, all the legit ways. And you just know at home that he understands Bitcoin. He was very early. He was before me, a lot of other players. He's probably got a hat at home with a pirate hat in it. He's got it in a box, and he's like, if only I'd gone that way. I'd be bigger than CZ. I'd be the biggest pirate in the world. I had to go the right way, And this little angel devils are having the conversation. And Brian's like, you did the right thing. I just think it's so great, this back and forth. And I don't know how it's going to end, if CZ triumphs or if Brian triumphs or which way it goes. Dan, Eve, you get the final word on this. What do you think is going to happen? Is Binance going to survive, or is it just going to be wrecked because they're, it's flying too close to the sun?
It's difficult because they obviously have quite a complicated company setup, right? They're kind of the more that there was coming out about FTX and their company setup and how crazy it was, the more kind of Binance actually is very much alike him. And there was this I don't know if it was recently, but I saw a video on Twitter, and it was someone interviewing CZ, and I don't know if it was the before or after, but they did it in the style of that interview with Sam Bankman-Fried, where he's like, "Oh, I'm with CZ." And like, oh, he just drives a normal car, and it's like, yeah, I drive a micro or something fucking look like crazy like that, and it just, the similarities between the two really started to shine. And I suddenly thought, oh, maybe Binance is, maybe they are very much alike. But ultimately, I think that there's obviously the allegations that they're traded against their customers, but they always seemed like they seemed on the surface like quite a transparent and caring. I say caring, but they the safe fund, things like that. They were very transparent about hacks and stuff. Obviously, there was the data slip up, but that's happened to everyone from Bitcoin Talk to Sony. So it's not something that's kind of isolated to just a few crypto companies. Obviously, it's bad. Ledger, right? Ledger happened to Ledger, right? In fact, someone let me know today that my name was on the Ledger list. I don't know if I should even be saying that, but it's public knowledge. Who cares? But they seem like they're responsible, so it would kind of be sad to see them fall. But at the same time, there needs to be more competition. As Jameson said, they're like most of the. I mean, there's apparently, according to CoinMarketCap, they're nearly $11 billion of trading volume today. The next that comes close to it's Coinbase with 1.3, then Kraken with 675 million. So they're literally miles apart from the competition, and there needs to be competition, right? There needs to be competition to keep things kind of, to keep everyone on their toes. So whilst I wouldn't like to see them go, I think I'd like to see some of their market share slip away to other players, to see a bit more, just a bit more competition in the market, and to reduce the impact when they do eventually slip up, right? Because that's the problem is there's such a huge impact from, as James again was saying, about the amount of Bitcoin they hold, right? The amount of funds they hold of all these other different companies. So if they do slip big time, there's going to be a massive hit. And regardless of whether it's actually, down to Bitcoin or not, which obviously it isn't, the rest of the world is going to see that it's a Bitcoin related thing, and that's going to impact badly on Bitcoin.
Vlad, do you have more on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's unfair to compare. Oh, my cat is choking. Sorry. Choking on fur. Anyway, it's unfair to compare the situation with Ledger, who only had a marketing database, with the situation from Binance, who actually had users holding their passports like this in a picture. This is actually called a passport, by the way. It's a hardware wallet. Nice coincidence. I just grabbed the first object on my desk. But yeah, it's not fair to try to normalize these exchange hacks and say, yeah, everyone has been doing it. The Bitcoin Talk hack cannot be compared because all you can get there is maybe your email address and your IP addresses from which you logged. It cannot possibly compare with some data that can be used by bad actors to pretend that they're you, sign up to all sorts of services, and make your life a living hell with the simple fact that you KYC'd to some entity that doesn't take good care of your data.
I guess that's the comparison, though, isn't it? It's their entities which haven't taken care of user data. So the leaks are different, but the general approach of not securing the user data effectively is the reason the user data was leaked. So that would be the comparison.
Well, and even look at cases where it wasn't leaked, but the data was sold. If you look at Twitter, all of the direct messages on Twitter were sold from one company to Elon Musk. And while we don't know what's happened, since they weren't end-to-end encrypted, for all we know, Elon is browsing everyone's DMs, and his engineers are, and they're having a great time. But I do have an update on Binance. I'm told from the future that CZ and Binance are buying the assets of Virgin Galactic, and that they'll be making their own rocket, and CZ will escape just like a James Bond villain to the moon. To the moon. Binance escapes. Moving on. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com and the YouTube channel this week. We've got some really great new interviews. Ben went to Costa Rica in Costa Rica and interviewed the co-founder of Twitter, Rabble, and he's really fired up about Nostr, so it's great to hear him talk about that. We've got an interview with Rockstar Dev, who helped organize Costa Rica, Paco from Run with Bitcoin, who's just excited to spread the word about Bitcoin. He's been running everywhere. And Kieran, the creator of the Nostr client Snort. All of these interviews on the World Crypto Network for free. You can watch them this week. No ads, sometimes maybe ads. And we've also got a proof of work interview where I talked to an NFT artist, Threesomes, who makes his own baseball cards, and he's going to make his own baseball card league of NFTs. And it's already going strong. He's got 1,500 of them or something so far. Moving on to issue 4, Sam Bankman-Fried charged with offering a $40 million bribe to Chinese officials. Sam Bankman-Fried was having trouble getting some of his money out of a Chinese cryptocurrency exchange, so he thought, hey, why not just bribe them? Also, his bail has been updated. He's not allowed to watch the Super Bowl on the internet anymore. There's a select group of websites he can go to, things like wikipedia.org, stuff like that. He is restricted. We've also heard that Sam Bankman's legal defense is being funded by a $13 million gift that he gave to his father, that his father is now giving back to him. Isn't that great? Ben Ark, what do you think about the new updates on Sam Bankman-Fried, the Chinese bribe, and now the money all coming from perhaps allegedly the stolen money?
I feel terrible because I know so little about it, so I'm like the worst person to go to. I was hoping you wouldn't pick me first, so I could just piggyback off everyone else's viewpoints and say, "Oh yeah, I agree with the rest of the panel," because I don't know anything about it. I've lost touch with the Sam Bankman-Fried thing, but you know the shit show continues, I suppose, and yeah, he's well funded from he's from an old school rich family, and he'll probably get away with it to a degree. But yeah. Just sorry, I don't have enough to contribute anything relevant, so I'm sorry.
Well, once you're giving money to the Democrats and you're giving money to the Republicans, why not give money to the Chinese, right? What's the difference? Jameson Lopp, what do you think about the new updates on SBF?
It's not surprising. I mean, I think this is what the facade of effective altruism has shown us, that it's really effectively, I'll be a sociopath and do whatever is best for me. And then, maybe in the future, I will donate some of the proceeds of my ill-gotten gains to some good causes. And that should cancel out, right? It's very interesting from the sense that he amassed such a huge fortune that it seems he still has access to a decent amount of to mount a huge legal defense that I've been skeptical all along that he would actually see prison. But now, with seeing just the diversity of different criminal charges, not just for financial related stuff with the exchange itself, but, the political donations and now, corruption and bribery, I think he's actually looking at a pretty decent amount of punishment. And, his huge war chest, I think, is only going to manage to delay the inevitable.
Now, this is something I've always been critical of the Dread Pirate Roberts for, the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts, is not having this extra money socked away for the legal defense. One would think if you were running any legal marketplace, you would, of course, go to your attorney first and say, hey, here's 25 million, in case I need any services in the future. You can just hold on to this for me. It's a real common practice. And it was sad when he wasn't able to buy the best defense possible. I think we'll find out, as Jameson says, if this defense works at all, if having an extra 10 to 13 million works, and he's able to buy some freedom, similar to the OJ case, allegedly, or if it doesn't work at all and there's just too much theft, too much crime, too many bribes and everything. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the latest charge against SBF bribing China?
I mean, he's definitely racking up it's becoming like in GTA, right? Like the charges like slowly. But you're right, the variety of them is definitely it's going to be quite a lot to avoid, right? Like how do you deny that being or how do you prove your innocence of in so many different areas where you seem to be culpable? I mean, let's remember that it wasn't in an interview he actually even admitted that they mixed customer funds, so that's pretty much a slam dunk, right? Initially, now once you have already admitted that, then how many other things that you could have done and not even plead ignorance to, right? Like, I didn't realize I was doing that. But weren't they based in the Bahamas? So the donating to American politics.
Gotta use the correct words. It's donating, it's bribing, sometimes taxes, sometimes revenue. There's a lot of words.
So it's also confusing. But it would only make sense that he's around the world, donating to other officials and, and lining their pockets, right? Because that's what you do to be able to stay afloat in the country and stay alive and not be sort of taken down, right? Is you get on the right side of people. And how do you do that? By donating to their parties. So I was initially thinking when it sort of came about that he's going to avoid it, the high flying family with the Stanford, professors, his parents, and all the people that he's obviously very well connected with, not just from politics, but just from the general family, by the sounds of it. It seems now that he's. I think he's going to get some serious time. Like it's really looking like that at the moment. And a lot of people lost a huge amount of money. Maybe he might even recoup some of those funds. Didn't FTX invest in? Aren't the shareholders of OpenAI? Like they didn't donate. Like Elon donated to OpenAI before it went private or something like that. I'm sure I read that FTX invested in some way. But just this backdooring of money, and even wasn't in the Bahamas. He let people from like the Bahamian government or something get their money out first. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy charges that are even after the fact that I think he's going to be hit with. Those will be probably the biggest charges, right? Stuff before that everything was uncovered. He might be able to slip away from, but all the nefarious things he's done after to try and cover his tracks and hide, I think those are the things that are going to be in the forefront of people's minds and the easiest things to prove to make him have some jail time, some serious jail time.
It's interesting you mentioned ChatGPT and OpenAI, Dan, because there's an article recently, it was on like the Daily Show or something, and they were talking about how judges are using ChatGPT to decide sentences. They're saying, for this kind of crime, how long should I sentence a person? And maybe they put a little back door in there where it says, how long should I sentence SBF? And it's like, SBF should be set free. He should have no sentence. And that would be a great benefit to that investment in OpenAI. It would really pay off. And before we go to Vlad, I just want to say, look how mean it is when the media turns on you. As Jameson was saying a few months ago, this guy was effective altruism, and the guy was, worshiping him in that YouTube video, and he looked all fuzzy and nice. And now it's like they catch one of these mid camera freeze moments on you, and he's very stern looking. And then, of course, this one, the black and white close up with the half mustache. It's devastating when they turn on you. Vlad, what do you think about SBF and his exciting new charges, bribing China and so forth?
I am in shock. I would have never believed this guy, who was playing League of Legends all day long, who was trying to do something good to the world, who was a very nice guy according to whatever, CNN or wherever that report was made. How could this guy bribe a foreign government? It's impossible, He was just this very altruistic young man who was trying to help his community, and he tried to build a research trading company and then build an exchange on top of that one, as if there wasn't any kind of conflict of interest between Alameda and FTX. But anyway, how could he do something like this? I'm in shock.
Well, and where could he fit the money? In those shorts? He wears t-shirt and shorts. He doesn't have any bribery money.
Of course not. Maybe he hid them in his hair. I can show you a few tricks if you grow your hair like this. But I don't know, man. It seems like it keeps on piling up. Seriously now, I was being ironic earlier, but there's so much that we don't know about the way that they conducted business. And I would not be surprised if... So right now what they're doing is to throw him under the bus, but I'm pretty sure that he has more deep political involvement. He gave money to both parties, allegedly. So he also had a pretty good defense from mainstream politicians and also from talking heads on television like Kevin O'Leary or whatever his name is. So for a while it seemed like he was untouchable, and he was even... I remember he was brought to some sort of event at a university, and in front of students he spoke as if nothing had happened. No, I think it was an event by a publication. I'm not sure if it was Financial
The
Times.
New York Times had a
New York Times,
pre-scheduled
yeah.
event where it was scheduled in advance, and then they went ahead and went with it, even though he was charged and broken and so forth.
And they were so nice to him and so mild. Like, are you okay? Did this upset you? Oh no, did you feel any kind of microaggressions from the people who claim that they want their money back? Oh, that's so mean of them to ask for their money. They're not supposed to do that. They should treat you as a human being and be nice with you. And now they threw him under the bus. They post nasty pictures of him. They portray him like he is a criminal. I'm pretty sure that he has lost support and he's gonna go to jail. But I mean, he has a pretty good life now, even though he cannot use a VPN to go back to his old ways. He can access Wikipedia. He can act that he still lives in his childhood because he is in his parents' house. He can play Game Boy and Nintendo 64 and whatever. Just be a big kid for the rest of his days. Pretty sure that the millions of dollars that he gave to his fathers are gonna buy him a very nice legal defense. And he can buy himself some time to maybe finish Majora's Mask, because that's a pretty difficult game.
He's finally got time to play the new Zelda coming out in just a few months. Very exciting for Sam. Let's move on to one more. We've got the exit question. We're just going to talk a little bit about Matt Damon. A new article says that Matt Damon did the Crypto.com ad because he was having a down year at the Clean Water Foundation. He went on TV, told everyone how great Bitcoin was and other cryptos that you could buy at Crypto.com. And he just did it for the water.org. So does that make it better? Does that make it worse? Ben Ark, you remember all the fun we had with the crypto commercials a few years ago? They're calling the Super Bowl the Crypto Bowl. What do you think about Matt Damon's latest excuse, and in general how he's been nothing but attacked from Hollywood and others? Well, I still think it was kind of a cool commercial. It was kind of the top and all that, but it was a cool commercial. Ben, what do you think?
It's definitely a well-produced commercial. A lot of money being spent on it because they've clearly got too much money. But is it backtracking? I guess like there's evidence for this stuff that he donated all of his earnings of that year to war.org. So maybe he did do the ad for that. I know that Crypto.com had donated like a bunch of money to war.org as well. So I think that's how they groomed him into doing the ad. But they just need to do more due diligence, these actors, before they get behind something. Because he's just like an actor guy, you know. So, and it's a complicated industry, the quote unquote crypto industry. So it's very easy to back the wrong project, which looks, you know, on the front of you, it looks, you know, legitimate. So it's yeah, I you know, sort of partly feel sorry for the dude, like, because it was just a very bad choice and poor judgment. But then we'll hopefully encourage other people who could have influence to have a little bit more due diligence when it comes to supporting like projects in the crypto industry. But it goes back to, you know, what Jameson was saying about the no, it doesn't. Sorry, I was going to say that about some Bankman-Fried. I'm so tired. I'm sorry. But yeah, yeah, it's just poor judgment on backing the wrong project. But well, if the money went
to kind of luck out. I mean, Crypto.com hasn't lost anyone's money that we know of. They didn't crash like FTX, and I think they're still paying for the Los Angeles, formerly the Staples Center, now the Crypto.com arena. So,
well, I think the problem
Fox, all the Bitcoin companies, they seem like they might survive. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's gambling, isn't it? He's backing a gambling website for gamblers.
You could buy Bitcoin there as well. You could be responsible. It's people's choices what they buy. But I think that the way the deal was probably structured, Ben, is probably you do this first one for the Water Foundation, and then later on, because this is such a lucrative signing, I'm sure he could do more commercials where he could get like a second house in Hawaii or something. But
it's interesting that he's backtracked from all the, you know, the criticism. Well, he's not backtracked. He's come out publicly and said this is the valid reason as to why I did it, or you can't just, you know.
I would like one of them just to come out and say, hey, I support crypto. I don't care. It's going to go up someday. You're all a bunch of idiots. I'm going to be back around again, you know, this other time. And maybe it could be Matt Damon from, you know, Good Will Hunting and all the movies that I love. But no, it wasn't. He just buried us like the other. Jameson, what do you think of the excuse? Matt Damon did the commercial for the Water Foundation. Tom Brady did the commercial because he wanted money. Like, is it worse? Is it better?
Yeah, I think it shows that at least partially his heart was in the right place. But, I think we should look at what happens with celebrities and why have there been so many lawsuits against celebrities for promoting various things over the past cycle. The short version is if you're a really big name mainstream celebrity, you're not even the one making these deals, right? You have teams of people who are working on behalf of your personal brand, and people are coming to them and pitching them. And they basically look at all of these things as a business opportunity. You're selling your brand for something. And I think the mismatch here is that they generally only think of what they're getting. They're not necessarily thinking of what the broader impact of what they are selling or promoting is. Now, it's one thing if you're promoting, kitchenware or, some product that, it's finite. It's, $100, $1,000, whatever. The amount of potential harm that can happen there is generally more limited. But when you start promoting financial products, there's basically no limit to the potential amount of harm because you don't know what degenerate gamblers may throw their entire life savings into something that you've pitched.
I think Jameson makes a really good point there. If you're selling like Ginsu knives, you only buy one set of knives. It probably doesn't ruin your life. But if you're buying Ginsu knives like gambling, where you keep having to get another 20, another 20, another 20, and you could end up losing all your money. I also think the reason this works is the same reason why propaganda works. A lot of the things that we have are a shortcut to thinking, where it's like, I don't want to bother researching something, so I'll just trust what the celebrity says. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this as YouTubers and other minor celebrities start transferring into this kind of marketing. If you look at the Mr. Beast candy bars, the Logan Paul Prime drink, sports drink, water, whatever it is, more and more of this marketing is going to happen because it works. People see Tom Brady up there and they're like, I want to use the Tom Brady FTX exchange. They don't bother to learn it's in the Bahamas or where Sam gets his naturally curly hair. They just want to invest. Dan, Eve, what do you think? Matt Damon did it for the water company. This makes everything fine.
Well, I think it's kind of nice that he did it for not just even selfish causes. He did it for the water company. That's kind of the thing that stands out. But there is a bit of a pattern here, right? Of just like every other day you hear like celebrity apologizes for X or celebrity apologizes for Y, whether it's something they said or something they endorsed. And obviously they've got responsibility because they have a wide net and people that kind of look up to them. And I think that Jameson hit that on the head right then. But if it's just a a product, a small product, people lose like $50, $100, maybe $1,000, but something where they could put their whole life savings in, the impact is huge. But there's plenty of other things that people have endorsed in, that have gone wrong. And even if you look at, Bitcoin's down from 67,000 to like 28 now, so there's just over 50%. But from all-time highs, Amazon went down 40 to 50%. Tesla went down 50%. Meta went down 40 to 50%. All these stocks have, and I didn't really see anyone going, oh, I'm forced to do an apology for saying, oh, I thought that the Facebook stock was okay, right? Because they just kind of accept it in those markets. It's just what happens. But whereas it's Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, it's this stick that we have to beat people with. It's like, oh, they endorsed a cryptocurrency product. They're very bad people. There's all sorts of sneaky doing some research on OpenAI, of course, because I was just interested in some other celebrity fails, but like Tiger Woods endorsing General Motors, and so they eventually had the promoting Cadillac to file for bankruptcy. There's all sorts of these that have happened in the past, but crypto is just the one thing where people seem like, it just seems like it's targeted a bit more, right? Because it's still on the bad side of society. It's still used for drugs and used for kidnapping and all sorts of the crazy things that people think it's used for without actually looking at the evidence of what it is actually used for and the reasons why it's a greater good for society. So I think that people, I'm someone that always apologizes for stuff, like, bump into someone or nearly bump into someone in the street and I'm like, oh, sorry, or whatever, I cut someone off, I'm like, I'm very sorry about that. But I think people need to apologize less and just stand by their stuff. And exactly as you're saying, go, yeah, I endorsed a product. That's what happened. It looked good at the time. I did my research, and bad things happen. But that's what happens in life. It's ultimately down to the person who's put the money, their life savings in, who's taken that risk. So I got people into Bitcoin who put a bit more than they should have put in, but I can't be responsible for that because I was never specifically telling them what to put in. It's people will make that decision themselves. So I think there just needs to be a bit more personal responsibility. And I feel sorry for Matt Damon. No, I don't feel sorry for him. There you go. I've done it now. I don't feel sorry for anyone, and I'm not apologizing.
But then as a person, when you bumped into someone, if you were like, you know what you should do? You should go on crypto.com and then fortune favors the brave.
Yeah.
Like, you would have some personal responsibility when they go and lose all their money, just like gambling on shit coins.
That is true, but I'm not going to apologize.
We want to get Vlad's opinion on Matt Damon, but I also want to mention Larry David, who managed to get paid by FTX to not endorse their product. In the commercial, Larry David says, I'd pass. I wouldn't use it. So he got the money. He didn't endorse them. He's the true winner in all of this. Vlad, what do you think about Larry David and Matt Damon, as well as Tom Brady, the other celebrity endorsements?
I mean, you got to curb your enthusiasm and think about it in the entire context of the commercial with Larry David, because in that one, he was always being proven wrong. He was laughing at the wheel. He was laughing at fire. He was laughing at pretty much every modern invention that was being presented to him, being like, it's nothing important. And then at the end, he says he'll pass on FTX. Obviously, he was right on that one, but the message was being presented in a way that, okay, he did not endorse in character or as a personality, but at the same time, he did participate in a commercial which endorsed FTX. I guess it's a matter of nuance there, but he did participate in this. As for Matt Damon's commercial, I'm not entirely sure if he donated 100% of the proceedings, so I'm not informed in that regard. But I want to ask, why is it that we learn right now that his motivation was this one, and it was not made clear at the time? Because if it's this kind of situation, it seems more like a post-rationalization, where you don't say what you've been up to until you're under scrutiny, and then you come up with some virtue signaling reason, which supposedly is going to make everything fine. So I'm not sure if 100% of the funds went to his charity, but if they did, I'm going to apologize.
It would have made more sense if he announced it when he took the commercial, or he could just have a policy about all of my commercial monies go to charity. But I do like Vlad's new advertising idea where I could get paid by Coke and I could do a whole advertisement where I'm like, don't drink Coke. Coke has too many sugars and too many calories. Don't drink Coke. And I could still get paid. It's like ironic advertising. Like, I could do really well. All right, we're running out of time. We're going to move on to prediction or a story of the week. Jameson Lopp, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Prediction. Well, this is tangentially related, but I predict that we're going to find some very interesting things from what just happened with Twitter open sourcing the recommendation algorithm. In particular, this kind of ties in with a lot of the stuff I've been talking about recently with sort of toxic maximalism and whatnot. I've been just perusing through some of the source code over the past few minutes and looking specifically at how Twitter is filtering out and de-amplifying what it considers to be toxicity. So it very well may be that toxic maximalism is really shooting itself in the foot when they're trying to do it on Twitter, at least. So maybe better to be toxic on Nostr.
Dan Eve, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Well, my story of the week is that I had tonsillitis again, which I overcame. I had to go to the hospital for the damn thing this time, which is again, in fact. But yeah, but I'm all good now. My other story of the week is the work that I'm doing right now, which I'm not allowed to say what it is, did really well. But and that's all I'm allowed to say right now.
Well, people love a secret, so we'll just keep
It's a
that
mystery.
quiet. Vlad Costa, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
My story of the week is that there was a very big discussion in Bitcoin privacy about the concept of toxic change and to which extent the change that you receive from a transaction can say a lot about you. And I think Thibaut Marshall, who is a French guy, actually his name is Thibaut Marshall, and that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. I botched it earlier, and I apologize for that. But he did a very good job in terms of explaining the different approaches to managing this change that you receive from transactions and how privacy wallets either isolate it or else mix it. And we have 3 examples. We have Join Market, we have Wasabi, and we have Samurai. And I think this concluded with a very nice Twitter Spaces call, which took place last night. And I think that was the best Twitter Spaces to which I ever listened. If you're into Bitcoin privacy, you got to check that out.
Very cool. And thanks so much to Vlad for having the best background, most animated. Looks great, man. Ben Ark.
I paid $200 for this.
Well, it was worth it, man. Ben Ark, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
It's pretty cool about the Twitter open sourcing the algos there. I like that. I was speaking to when I spoke to Rob.
We just waited till Ben had his moment in the spotlight for his internet to break. Almost a conspiracy. Vlad, do you want to tell us more about your background while we wait for Ben to reconnect?
Yeah, so this was made by an architecture student from Romania. And what I like about it is how the spaceships have depth. So you can see that some of them go behind buildings and others go in front of buildings. I can look at this all day.
I like it. That's cool.
Nice. I like the train that keeps coming by. It's really dramatic and it looks good. Well, I don't know if Ben's going to make it back. He's probably rebooting his Linux computer now. But I think Ben probably would have talked about his interview with Rabble on the World Crypto Network. And it was really exciting. I didn't know Rabble before, but apparently he worked on Twitter. And what he did was a lot of the telephony stuff. So back when Twitter was based on text messages and you had to technically send them through the system, he handled a lot of that complexity. He was working on his own project called Scuttlebutt, which was similar to Nostr in that it was a messaging sending type system. And it was really neat in the interview. He's kind of slowed his work on that and expanded his work on Nostr. It sounded like they were building something called Nostr Social. It might be kind of like a Facebook on Nostr. They talked about having a Telegram on Nostr in addition to Twitter clones on Nostr. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff on the World Crypto Network this week from Nostrica, thanks to Ben. And that's about it. We're out of time. So be sure to give us a thumbs up down below, push subscribe, add a comment, say hello in the chat. And until next time,